Welcome back, everyone. Today we're diving deep, really deep, into this book called The Healing Flow, Artistic Expression in Therapy.
We've got excerpts from the book itself, covering both the theory and the practical applications.
Yeah, it's a lot. Like, how do you actually use this stuff, right?
Exactly.
But today, what we really want to do is break down this idea of interpretive quilting for you and see how images, especially in therapy, can be such a powerful tool for healing and understanding.
Right off the bat, you'll notice this isn't your typical what does the symbol mean kind of approach to art.
Right.
The author, their doctoral work really forms the basis of this book and it shifts the focus. It's less about interpreting fixed meanings and more about that direct lived experience you have when you're actually creating and interacting with images as they take shape.
It's the process that matters, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's where this whole idea of the healing flow comes in. This idea that healing comes from accepting the reality of the images you create and how your responses to them change and evolve as you work with them.
And even if you don't immediately get some big, clear meaning, the act of creation itself, that can be profoundly therapeutic.
Right. Just making the art. Okay, so to understand this a bit more, the author gives us this really interesting framework, this interpretative quilting.
So imagine a quilt. Each piece, each patch in that quilt represents a moment, a feeling, almost like it's solidified. The book calls this a coagulated aspect of that healing flow within you.
Okay, I'm picturing it. Now, what about the interpretive border around this quilt? What's that all about for our listeners?
That's like a container, a way to frame and make sense of all these different parts. It helps you kind of freeze that flow for a second, step back and reflect.
Like taking a snapshot.
Yeah, exactly, like a snapshot. It's not about finding the one truth in the image. It's about understanding the process, the journey, through different lenses.
Okay, now before we go too much further, let's talk about where these ideas come from, right?
Yeah, the author has a whole section of acknowledgments, and it shows how collaborative this whole thing is.
Absolutely. You see, thanks to people like Dr. Vivian Dorok-Lazowski, the thesis supervisor, who also wrote the foreword, really emphasizing this idea of the healing flow. And then there's Dr. Ron Silvers, who offered insights from the art world, and Dr. David C. Wright, a psychiatrist at Homewood Health Center, who brought in a clinical perspective.
And really importantly, they thank the patients themselves because it's their experiences, the images they created, that were absolutely crucial to understanding how this all works.
It's a collaborative effort, for sure.
Definitely.
And we should mention Homewood Health Center is where this doctoral research was actually carried out.
Yeah.
So this is grounded in a real clinical setting, which is interesting.
All right, so we've got this idea of healing flow and interpretive quilting as our way of looking at things. Let's dig into some of the big ideas here, and one that really struck me was this concept that images are so much more than just what they depict, literally.
Oh yeah, that Picasso anecdote is perfect for understanding this. This guy, he shows Picasso a wallet photo of his wife, right? Thinking it's a true representation. Like, this is her.
And Picasso says, she's awfully small and flat.
Which, it's funny, but it's also so profound, right?
It gets at how an image can hold so much personal meaning for the individual, memories, emotions. It becomes more than just the visual likeness.
And this brings us to what the book calls the dialogical image word process.
The husband, he sees the photo and it's loaded with his own experiences, his whole relationship with his wife. Picasso, he's just looking at the physical qualities, taking away that personal context.
So the same image, two completely different ways of relating to it.
Totally different. And then we have this concept of the holon, which might sound a little jargony, but it's actually really helpful.
Yeah, break that down for us.
So a holon is something that's both a whole and a part. To really get any phenomenon, Wilbur, the guy who came up with this, he says you have to look at it through its different aspects, its intentional aspects, the I, your inner experience, its behavioral aspects, the it, how it looks from the outside.
And its cultural, the we, and social settings.
Exactly. So it's this multifaceted view, not just one objective lens.
Multiple perspectives.
And the book suggests that science, which tends to focus on that objective it, has sometimes overshadowed the subjective I and the intersubjective we.
Our inner world and our shared cultural understandings.
Right. And that's where art comes in. It allows you to explore those inner aspects, that creativity, what the book calls spirit.
So art helps bring those different dimensions together. Now let's get into the theory behind this healing flow model. The book compares theory and text to rock and water, which is an interesting analogy.
It's a good one, right?
So think of the rock, the theory, as providing structure, a foundation. But the water, that represents the healing flow. It's always moving, changing, and it can shape the rock over time.
And in art, I guess you could say lines define shapes, but colors influence how we see those lines. It's all connected. Exactly. And this idea extends to the interpretive quilt metaphor. Each quilt block is an aspect of your healing, and the interpretive border, that's the researcher's framework, it holds all these blocks together, helps illuminate them.
Like a way to contain something that's always moving and changing.
Yeah.
Now, the book talks about these immemorial images, which seems to go beyond just our personal memories, drawing on Lasowski's work here.
This is where it gets really interesting, right? The idea is that some images aren't actually tied to your personal past. They tap into something bigger, like a web of life and energy.
Yeah.
These pure recollections, Lasowski calls them, they contain all these potential paths you could have taken, maybe paths you will take.
So it's about potential, not just the past.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the fundamental images of your life, different from the memories you consciously recall. Really fascinating stuff.
Very cool. And then the book dives into the role of images in memory itself, citing Kukler and Melian.
They argue that memory isn't just a recording, it's an active process of construction, and images play a central role. They highlight 4 themes. First, that images are active in remembering. Second, they're linked to historical contexts.
Third, they're culturally specific.
Right. And fourth, this is interesting, forgetting and recollecting, they're actually connected. What we forget shapes our memory as much as what we remember.
That's so interesting how what we forget defines us culturally. Okay, switching gears a little, the book brings in Johnson's perspective on the importance of images and metaphors. He argues that using images and metaphors is fundamental to, well, pretty much everything we do.
He's got this hypothesis about image schemata, these basic patterns that come from our bodily interactions, like up and down, container and contained, and those get extended metaphorically to help us understand abstract concepts and even shared cultural memories.
So those physical experiences shape how we understand the world.
Exactly. And he says a healthy imaging system is crucial for processing experiences, dealing with tough stuff, being present, even imagining the future. Our internal images and metaphors, that's how we connect with the world.
That makes sense. Think about how often we understand abstract ideas by relating them back to something concrete.
All the time.
Okay, the book also tackles tougher topics, like frightening images and trauma, drawing on Cohen's work here.
Cohen highlights the role of visual and sensory stuff in how we store and recall traumatic events. When something's too overwhelming or unexpected, we can't always process it through language.
So instead of a story, it becomes fragmented.
Right. He calls these disrupted schemas, stored in short-term memory, mostly visually and sensorimotorily, the body's experience. That's the basis of traumatic memories, often wordless, disconnected, maybe even meaningless.
And this is where art making can be so powerful as a bridge between those things.
Exactly. Working with images can help mediate the flow between those images, your feelings, and your thoughts. Those traumatic images, which might start very literal, can become more abstract, symbolic. And the book suggests that this can help you break free from patterns, maybe by engaging with those immemorial images we talked about.
So it's like finding a new language for experiences that words can't express.
Exactly. And the book really stresses how trauma impacts this whole healing flow.
It disrupts the balance.
It can damage your ability to process, to transform what you went through, leading to isolation, even difficulty dreaming, imagining the future. Art becomes vital in repairing that damage, restoring the flow.
Art can help piece those fragmented parts back together.
Yeah.
Now, to show how diverse images can be in therapy, the book identifies 9 types.
This is helpful, right? You've got images of wounding, healing, remembering, transforming, connecting. Images of clutter even, representing that overload we can feel. Then there's images of desire, which can sometimes color our perception. And grounding images, to bring us back to the present. And lastly, images of acceptance, letting go.
It really shows how many roles art can play in the healing journey. And the book connects this healing flow model back to childhood development, using Dissociak's work.
Dissociak sees the arts as crucial to human development, health even. She argues that from infancy, we have this innate drive to interact with the world in these patterned, multisensory, emotional ways.
Think about babies imitating sounds, playing with toys.
It's all part of that back and forth dialogue with the world.
So that early play and image making lays the foundation for the healing flow model later on.
Exactly. And she looks at it from an evolutionary perspective, showing how art is adaptive, helps us survive, evolve. This early connection between caregiver and infant, she says it shapes our capacity for belonging, for meaning making, gaining confidence through making things, expressing what's important.
So art is more than just a hobby. It's deep in our development.
Absolutely. And she contrasts this with those views of art as self-absorbed, you
Yeah.
know?
Right.
She argues it's more than just therapy for self-esteem. It helps us recognize our shared humanity.
Engaging our minds and bodies.
Exactly.
And she even compares art and sports and society, which is interesting.
She points out that unlike sports, which are often competitive, art can be non-competitive, collaborative. Everyone wins in a way, right?
You create something, you experience something, you're all in it together.
And something often remains. It affects us deeply, unlike maybe that conflict-driven nature of some sporting events.
Right, right.
And art can help transform difficult feelings, increase self-knowledge. It's powerful stuff.
Definitely. And the book also touches on how the arts are sometimes undervalued, especially compared to how much we see sports in the media.
The book suggests this imbalance might actually be holding us back societally, because the healing powers of art, they're crucial for cooperation, moving beyond aggression.
So fostering connection, not just competition. Now let's talk about art and rituals and contemplation. The book contrasts how art can be so full of potential for discovery versus that more sterile way it's often encountered now, with the experts telling us what things mean.
That reliance on experts can limit art's role in what they call soul-making, that personal growth and understanding. Art, because it speaks to us on so many levels, it's uniquely equipped for that.
So it's about a more direct personal connection, not just someone else's interpretation. And the book ties this back to psychotherapy, how we can transcend trauma.
In a supportive group setting, art can be this tool to transcend and transform those experiences through this dialogue between image and word. It mirrors how art has historically been used for healing, connecting people to their social worlds, which is so important for well-being.
It's like tapping into something ancient, but also so relevant today. Now, the book's central idea is interpretive quilting, and it actually compares it to traditional quilt making, which I found fascinating.
What's interesting is the connection to women's lives and to everyday forms of expression. Quilting has historically been a way for people to express themselves within a social context, not just for the elite.
And the book mentions Ball's work on quilts as social texts, challenging traditional representations.
Exactly. So just like those quilts hold stories, the interpretive quilt becomes a way to weave together experiences and perspectives in therapy.
Okay, so how does this interpretive quilting work? What about the researcher's role in all of this?
The book emphasizes a role that moves between participation and observation, really valuing intuition, even dreams. It draws from phenomenological approaches, that focus on experience, and hermeneutical approaches, which are about interpretation.
So experiencing and interpreting, both are important. And then there's the dialogical image word process itself. How does that work in artistic creation?
The book uses life drawing as an example. It's this constant back and forth between the materials, your internal perceptions, and what you're observing. The image becomes what they call an embodied iconic abstraction. It holds your feelings, thoughts, interpretations.
So it's more than just a copy of what you see.
It's infused with your experience.
And they compare this to transference and countertransference in therapy, which is interesting.
Yeah, just like the therapist and client bring their own stuff into the relationship, you bring your experiences to the artwork. It's a really personal process.
Definitely. Now, the book goes into how art therapy groups are used clinically, specifically for PTSD recovery. What does that look like?
These are insight-oriented groups where making images is central. It's about integrating verbal and nonverbal experience. And the book points out that each art material, paints, clay, whatever it is, offers different possibilities for expression.
So the materials themselves become part of the dialogue.
Yes, exactly. And the book outlines these stages in the creative process.
There's discovery, where insights emerge, but also potential for isolation if those aren't explored. Then there's incubation, that unconscious processing, illumination, the aha moment, and finally evaluation, where you analyze the artwork for meaning.
And what's important is that unlike art made in isolation, within therapy, these phases are guided by the therapist towards integration into your life. It's about bringing those insights back into your world.
It's grounded, in a way.
Yeah. To help us picture this, the book gives us these fictionalized accounts of a session, showing that healing flow in action. There's Brenda setting boundaries and processing trauma through drawings of balloons and fire.
Mary moving from fear to anger in paintings of monsters and tears.
And Naomi with these evolving abstract expressions of energy and conflict. And then there's Sam shifting from rigid, detailed nightmare images to these more fluid, open self-portraits using plasticine.
Each showing a different way this process can unfold.
Yeah.
And after the images are created, there's this important verbal reflection phase, right?
Right. This is where the group shares their associations with the images, gives feedback. It helps people step outside their own perspective, see things in new ways.
So it's creating that shared understanding.
Yes. And the book also emphasizes the transition phase and closing ritual as really important.
Yeah, it's a time for the therapist to reflect, to process the group's impact, which requires knowledge and trust in the process.
It's this reflective ritual, distinct from routine, allowing for deeper processing, which can help manage the group dynamics, prevent reenactments of trauma.
So it's about the therapist holding that space, too.
Absolutely.
So what's the overall impact of this dialogical image word process for the listener?
It allows those unconscious things to become visible, leading to a more integrated sense of self. The artwork becomes a tool for self-discovery, and that shared space allows for collective learning.
Bringing the unconscious to the conscious through art, and then exploring it through words.
Exactly.
Now, the book also addresses some challenges with this approach.
It acknowledges how cultural views can influence how we come into art therapy, but that the therapeutic setting can help us work through that. The therapist's role is crucial, especially when images seem more connected to problems than strengths.
I have to be really sensitive to the nuances.
Definitely. And the book cautions against interpreting images too quickly because that can disrupt the flow. And not all images lead to authentic connection. Sometimes they're used for disguise.
Right, so the therapist really needs to be attuned to what's happening.
Absolutely.
And the book goes beyond just individual healing to look at broader cultural implications.
It suggests that what we learn from art therapy about disconnection and fragmentation mirrors some of the issues we see in the arts, literature, postmodern thought even.
So art as a space to address those cultural fractures.
Exactly.
The book also touches on this idea of subtle life energy, which is recognized in lots of healing systems, but not so much in Western medicine.
Yeah, many traditions acknowledge this kind of energy, like Qi or Qi. The book points out that research into these energies might help bridge the gap between mind and body, which are often seen as separate in Western thought.
It's a more holistic perspective.
Definitely.
And just to be clear, the book differentiates the creative process from psychosis, citing Rothenberg's research.
Rothenberg shows that the creative process, unlike psychosis, involves conscious awareness, logical thought. It's healthy, adaptive. It needs that ability to handle anxiety without getting defensive.
Well, psychosis is more about defense.
Right.
So while they might seem similar on the surface, they're different underneath.
Totally different.
And finally, the book ends with this evocative metaphor for the creative process, comparing it to the sea.
Vital, beautiful, but potentially overwhelming. The therapist becomes a guide, helping you navigate, stay balanced, and develop your inner self. And the interpretive quilt, it comes back as this way to represent these non-verbal experiences.
So bringing it all together, we've explored the healing flow and how interpretive quilting helps us understand art's power in therapy. It's about moving beyond symbol interpretation to that direct experience of image making.
It engages your whole being, mind, body, spirit, for self-discovery, processing difficult stuff, and reconnecting with yourself and the world.
As you think about all this, consider how you might engage with creative expression in your own life, not necessarily for a specific outcome, but just to explore your inner landscape. What images, whether visual, auditory, metaphorical, resonate with you? What might they reveal if you just let yourself explore them?
The ideas we've discussed, from nonverbal expression to creativity and healing, they're rich, complex. We encourage you to dig deeper into the authors we've mentioned, see what you discover.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone.
Until next time.
Take care.